Oh, no, please. Magic button. Oh, good.
There's Cheryl. Nice. Good evening. Hi.
Everything's set.
Okay, hi, Gwen. All right, we are in Parshat Terumah. We are now, the rest of Sefer Shmot is focused primarily on the Mishkan, on the tabernacle, and we have a whole parsha that's going to deal with the Big Day Kahuna, the Kohen's various garments and clothing. We of course will have the sin of the Chet HaEgel, the sin of the golden calf. I think in a previous year we discussed the major machloket about whether the Mishkan is only given after the Chet HaEgel as a sort of atonement for what the Jewish people did, or if, as the Ramban contends, the Mishkan was always part of the initial plan as a way to perpetuate the experience of Har Sinai. So that's a fascinating debate, and that has real ramifications both for the structure of Sefer Shmot as well as how we understand the Mishkan. But today I want to take a more, take a step back maybe, and this is an observation, a general theme that many have noted before, and I just wanted to first play it out and then think together about what the significance of that might be.
Can you make
That
the text a little bigger?
bigger, yeah. Yeah. One of my monitor cables stopped working, so
Here.
is that better?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay. All right, so we'll start with the Medrash in Tanchuma, which sort of lays out the general idea, which is Amar Rabbi Yaakov bar Rabbi Asi, Lama hu omer Hashem ahavti me'on beitecha u'mekom mishkan kvodecha. There's a verse in Tehillim that says, God, I love the habitation of thy house and the place where your glory dwells. What's the meaning of that pasuk? Bishvil sheshakul kineged briat ha'olam. So according to this, it says that because this is clearly the Mishkan, Mikol Mishkan Kevodecha, is referring to the Mishkan, to the tabernacle. And the answer as to the significance of why the author of this Tehillim loves the tabernacle so much is because the tabernacle is Shakul Keneged Briat Olam, is equal to the creation of the world itself. And then it brings all sorts of, it's actually pretty cute what this Medrash does. It, for each day of creation, it shows a parallel in the Mishkan. You can look at that on your own, but we'll skip to the very bottom where the Medrash asks, Lama hamishkan shakul keneged shamayim va'aretz? Why is this comparison or equation made between the Mishkan and creation? Ela ma shamayim va'aretz hem edim al Yisrael, dichtiv ha'idoti bachem hayom et hashamayim v'et ha'aretz, af Mishkan edut el Yisrael, shene'emar ele pekudei hamishkan, Mishkan ha'edut. Just as the heavens and earth serve as a testimony or bear witness for the Jewish people, so too does the Mishkan bear witness for the Jewish people. As it says, I call heaven and earth to witness against you this day. Oh, sorry, that's the verse for the creation. As heaven and earth bear witness concerning Israel, as it is written, I call heaven and earth to witness against you this day. So the tabernacle bears witness in behalf of Israel, as it says, these are the accounts of the tabernacle of the testimony. So number one, what does this, okay, so they both are testimony. What does that mean? What does it mean that heaven and earth is testimony for the Jewish people? And how is the Mishkan then testimony for the Jewish people?
That's a good question.
Any thoughts on that?
Well, the tablets are in the ark
Right.
and we treasure them and we try to follow them. So the tablets can attest to our love of them and desire to follow them.
Okay, so that's an interesting question also about what is, right, what we mentioned earlier, what is the ultimate purpose of the Mishkan, or what is the primary focus of it? So if we're going to call it Mishkan Ha'edut, the Mishkan of testimony, that implies that the luchot, that the tablets that are housed within the Mishkan, perhaps are the most central component of the Mishkan. Right, so back to that question about, is it meant as an atonement for the Chet HaEgel? Is it meant as something else? So if the focus on the Mishkan is edut, that would imply that the focus is on the luchot, on the tablets.
I've got half an idea.
Okay.
So the verse from Devarim is bearing witness against you. It's like a warning, right?
Right.
And the tabernacle in the Mishkan is it's kind of the opposite of that. It's the place where the Bnei Yisrael come close to God. It almost feels like it's at two ends of a spectrum.
Okay.
Sort of a bit of closeness and distance from God.
Okay, so that these two things sort of represent the extremes, or right, if we think about we think about a lot of things nowadays in terms of a spectrum. So you're saying that perhaps heaven and earth sets the spectrum on one extreme about when we're distanced from God, and when we don't follow God's instructions, and the Mishkan is a chance on the other side of the spectrum to be most intimate and most close with God.
Yes, that's my thought.
Okay. That's a beautiful thought, and that's definitely possible. But again, I think the Mishkan could be a testimony in the way that you're describing it, Beatrice, but it could just as well be a testimony in the way that Shemaim and Aretz are a testimony. Right? It could be, right? Especially if we go with the theory that says the Mishkan is commanded after the Chet HaEgel, or is presented after Chet HaEgel as an atonement. So perhaps we could see it as being kind of, this is when you get, when the things go really bad, you need this Mishkan because you couldn't function in the more ideal way of whatever was intended. It could go both ways. I'm not saying one is more right than the other, but
yeah, absolutely. I see how you make that connection between the two.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there any, how about the physicality?
Say a little bit more about that.
Well, the physicality of the Mishkan.
Yeah.
And the ark, the scrolls and so on and so forth.
Yeah, so I mean the Mishkan is a very physical place, right? We have all these, both the architecture of it, the structure, all the different kalim, all the different utensils that are used in the service, and we have very precise instructions and detail given about the construction of all of it. Just like, obviously creation of the world is a very physical thing. And it's ironic because we don't think of God in physical terms, right? God is the opposite of physical, but it's through this physicality that we're able to encounter and experience God.
People come to the Mishkan,
Yeah,
and so the physicality of the Mishkan, I think, is very important.
for sure. Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
we ever say that the temple in Jerusalem is a witness?
Do we ever say it's a witness,
I mean, is
a testimony?
um, that,
Uh,
that the temple bears witness concerning Israel?
Yeah. Nothing is immediately coming to mind in Tanakh, which doesn't mean anything. My knowledge of Tanakh does, the fact that I don't have recall doesn't indicate one thing or another. It's
Nor
an interesting
mine.
question. We'll have to look that up, and that's all of our homework. If it's specifically I mean, we know that the Beis Hamikdash replaces or supplants the Mishkan. So if the Mishkan is in fact a Mishkan HaIdut, then that functionality should continue on to the Beis Hamikdash, but no description of the Beis Hamikdash in those terms is coming to mind for me right now. So I wanted to, we sort of have this idea planted by the Medrash, and I wanted to take some time to point out that it's not just this sort of, we often think of midrashim as pulling ideas out of the out of the hat, and where is it coming from? But I wanted to show how there's some very strong textual connections between these two sections of the Chumash. And even before we go into what I put together, if anyone has just any connections that come to mind in the description, in the passages, I don't expect anyone to know by heart what's there, but if there's any sort of generalities about something that you think might be similar between the two, share it with us. And if we can start from there.
I just know that Nafama Lida has done a lot of work on this, and her book is beautiful on this subject.
Yeah.
This is one of these areas that she elaborated very beautifully, but I don't remember all the details of it. So I'm looking forward to going through it.
So I'll get the ball rolling. We know that how many days did it take for creation of the world?
6.
Well, 7, right? Shabbos is part of creation. Right?
But
Rashi
that
makes
was that was the day that Hashem rested.
right, but that rest is
That's
not
on
just a
Shabbos.
passive not doing anything, right? Vayishvot bayom hashvi'i. It's sort of it's 6 or 7. I mean, yes, depending how you count. So we have, but we think about the 7 days of creation, and how many when the Mishkan, I don't know how long it took to build the Mishkan, but at the end we have a dedication process of the Mishkan, and how long did that last for?
8 days?
7 days, right?
I said 8.
Yeah, right. Right. So we have 7.
Yeah.
All right, if we can turn, let me just bring us to the handy table that I made. We could either go through this very quickly, or we could spend some time with it. So the first connection that I noted is during creation, again, starting sort of at the end. Vayar Elokim et kol asher asa v'hinei tov me'od vay'erev vayvoker yom hashishi. God saw all that He had made, and it was behold, it was very good. It was evening, it was morning, the 6th day. So by the completion of the Mishkan, at the very end of Sefer Shmot, we have Vayar Moshe et Kol Hamelacha. Moshe saw all the work that had been done. V'hinei asu ota kasher tiva Hashem. And behold, they had done it just as God had commanded. Vayvarech otam Moshe. Moshe blessed them. So so Moshe, just like Hashem, we have this sort of evaluation of that which had been done, as seen, right? When we're making these textual connections, we want the more detail, the better. That really just strengthens the case. So it's the same verb, vayar, et kol. In both cases, they saw everything. Vihine, and behold. So we have that same structure. Someone made the point. I'm not sure if this is really that it sort of highlights the limits of the comparison, that in God's assessment, he's able to declare v'hine tov me'od. Behold, it was very good. But Moshe can't make any value statement, right? He can't evaluate that it was good. He can just evaluate that they did what they were supposed to do. So that's sort of a shortcoming, that God, Hashem, can objectively say that the creation was tov me'od, whereas Moshe can't make any evaluation statement about it. So that's number one. Number two, this is a pasuk that we know from our davening from Kiddush. Vayichulu hashamayim ve'aretz v'chol tziva'am. Vayichal Elohim bayom hashvi melachto asher asa. Vayishbot bayom hashvi mikom melachto asher asa. The heaven and the earth were finished in all of their array, and God finished the work on the seventh day, and he rested on the seventh day from all the work that he had done. So what's the key verb in those two verses?
Rested.
Cease.
Verb.
Finishing.
Rested.
I would say it's a different one.
Ceased.
Ceased. Vayichulu. Vayichal. So
Ah,
God ceased. God stopped. Then if you move over to the Mishkan, Vatechel kol avodat Mishkan Ohel Moed, Vaya'asu b'nei Yisrael kol asher tzivah Hashem et Moshe ken asu. Thus was completed all the work of the Mishkan, and Bnei Yisrael did everything that Hashem had commanded Moshe. That's what they did. And then again in the next chapter, Vayakam et hachatzer saviv lamishkan mizbeach. Vayechal Moshe et hamelacha. He set up the enclosure around the Mishkan and the altar, and he put up the screen, and Moshe had finished the work. Again, we have twice that verb of the same shoish, vayechal. He completed, he ceased. Everyone with me so far?
Mm-hmm.
Does
Oh,
the
yeah.
word kol have an implication of complete?
There's the word kol.
Was Vayichal ended, concluded, but there's that
Right.
kol. So
Yeah,
all
I mean,
the
I
work was
think
done.
they are connected. We'd have to get a linguist to confirm that, but there's definitely an idea that in the shoresh for vayechal or vayechulu would be kala, kaf lamed hey, and kol, which means everything or all, is the first two letters. So certainly we understand that the first Hebrew verbs roots are generally three letters, but it's really two letters that are the main. The third letter of the root often just adds some nuance, and I'm blanking on a good example of that right now, but
Kalal to cease is the other option. So,
halal is to include, right? So it's right. So yeah. So
kalos hanefesh is the extinction of the nefesh, right? Ceasing of the nefesh.
so that's the same shorish as kalat, kaf lamed hey.
Mm-hmm. No,
So-
it's the shorish is kalal. There is often listed that way with two roots. They have the option of putting a hey after it or reduplicating the consonant. Yeah,
Right.
and they can have very different meanings, So,
Okay, moving along, again, familiar to us from Kiddush on Shabbos. Vayivarech Elokim et Yom Hashvi vayikadesh oto ki rosh shavat mikol malachto asher bara Elokim lasot. God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it because that is the day in which he ceased, or he stopped, or he rested from all of his work, which God had done. At the conclusion of the Mishkan story, Vayar Moshe, the verse we already saw this verse. Vayar Moshe kol hamacha v'hinei asu ata kasher tziva Hashem ken asu vayivarech otam Moshe. Moshe blesses them. So at the conclusion of these two things, we have blessing that's given. The next one I try to highlight here, and that is if we look in the story of creation, we have the frequent repetition of the verb asa, vayas. Vayas Elokim et harakia, vayas Elokim et shnei amarot hagdolim. God made the firmament. God made the two great luminates, lights. Vayas Elokim et chayat haaretz. God made the animals on the earth. Vayom Elokim naaseh Adam b'tzalmenu kidmutenu. When I prepared the source sheet, by the way, I had all these bolded, and when I converted it to PDF, the bolding went away. So sorry about that. So Vayom Elokim naaseh Adam b'tzalmenu kidmutenu. Let us make man in our image. Vayelokim ekol asher asa. God saw all that he had done. Vayichlu shamayim v'tzachol zman v'yachal Elokim vayom hashvim melachto asher asa. Vayishbot vayom hashvim mikol melachto asher asa. So those who pay attention claim, I found more, but they claim that the verb is used 7 times in the story of creation. It certainly appears more than 7 times. How they count 7, I'm not totally sure, but it appears at least 7 times. There's definitely significance if you can to the number 7. So there's, to get to exactly 7 is that's one of the key indicators in analyzing passages of Tanakh. I'm not sure which 7 they're counting and how they justify excluding the others, but it appears at least 7 times. Then if you go to the Mishkan story, I didn't even try to do it to bring them all. Over 200 times we have that verb. Literally multiple times within the description of each of the vessels that's made, we have vayas, vayas, vayas. So I just brought the very beginning of the whole section. V'asu li mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. They shall make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. Kol asher ani mareh otcha et tavnit hamishkan ve'tavnit kol kelav v'chein ta'asu. Everything that I show you, the structure of the Mishkan and the structure of all of its vessels, so shall you do. And then in the first of the vessels, we have the asu aron aseh shitim. They should make an ark out of acacia wood. So that verb is certainly the primary verb in both stories, whether it's 7 times or 200 plus times.
why doesn't Bereshit use the word bara more frequently?
Why doesn't Bereshit use
situations?
bara? That's a good question. It does use bara. I didn't count it, and I don't know how many times bara is there. That's a Bereshit question, so I can legitimately tonight say I have to look at it. I look into that. I'm not sure what the significance is in this context of asa versus bara.
Well,
I think
to me, it suggests that the human involvement in the perfection of creation was encouraged from the beginning by using the word asa as the bridge word.
okay.
That kind of.
How does asa indicate that there should be human involvement?
Well, we would say God created the sun. Why not say it that way? I mean, good grief, made the sun, it just doesn't have quite the same power, right?
Yeah, so I always,
So
I was gonna say
that's
that
why I
I
raised the
think
question, but
bara,
what I'm saying is that the reason why it seems that it might be there is because the Holy One really needs us to help complete the creation. And so to use the word made allows us to realize that we have a parallel kind of possibility, that type of idea.
okay, so I mean, that's definitely going to be one of the takeaways from this analysis that we're doing. On its own, though, you'd have to, I mean, maybe the Mishkan is the case, is that proves it, but you'd have to make a better case for why asa, meaning we're still talking about God creating the world. So there's no human involvement in that, and I mean, from the Torah's description, it says that it was completed, right? Whatever God did was complete. So bara versus asa, I don't know. And I mean, I think bara means in the fancy term creation ex nihilo, creation something, right? From nothing. Whereas asa means more forming. But yeah, we'd have to unpack it a little bit more in the context of creation, of the story of creation, to understand what the significance might be. I think you're 1000% correct that in the parallel from the story of creation to the story of the Mishkan, one of the messages is that there is a human role in completing this task, or seeing through, or fulfilling this great this great project that God began, as part, as evidenced by the use of the same verb. So there's definitely something there, but we'd have to unpack a little bit more within Breshit what the significance and what the meaning is. And maybe that'll be for next year's Parsha Shir on Parshat Breshit, if anyone remembers. We'll have to go back to the tape on this one and remind ourselves. Okay, so the next one is actually a parallel. The creation parallel comes not from Breshit, but from Mishle, from Proverbs. And there, the psukim read, Hashem bechachma yasad eretz konein shamayim bitvuna, b'da'ato tehamot nivka'u ushchakim yirafu tal. The Lord founded the earth by wisdom. He established the heavens by understanding. By his knowledge, the depths burst apart, and the skies distilled dew. Does this remind us of anything from the Mishkan? And if you're not sure, you could look at the pasuk right here. So in the construction of the Mishkan, we're told at one point, Va'amalei oto ruach Elokim bechachma uvitvuna uvida'at uvechol milacha. I have endowed him with a divine spirit of skill, ability, and knowledge in every kind of craft. Who's this talking about?
Zalel?
Bezalel, yeah. So the attributes or the skills or the qualities that Bezalel is given to construct the Mishkan are Chachma, Tfuna, and Da'at. Go back to that pasuk from Mishle. Hashem bechachma yasar eretz konein shamayim bitvuna b'da'ato tomot nivka'u. So it's again just like the verb used is asa. The qualities used in both creation and the Mishkan are these qualities or attributes, or whatever word we want to use for it, of Chachma, Tfuna, and Da'at. And it's interesting, right? This is the same JPS translation, which translates these phrases differently in both cases.
That sounds almost like what the Chabad named themselves from.
No, that it is what Chabad named itself. Chabad stands for Chachma, Bina, and Dat.
Oh, okay. Exactly the same thing.
Exactly the same.
Oh, okay.
And it's but they take it from the Sfirot, from the 10 mystical divine attributes or emanations. But yeah, this is where Chabad comes from these attributes.
Wisdom, knowledge, and what is it? Truth?
Um,
Wisdom.
wisdom, understanding, and knowledge is how I always translated it.
Oh,
Okay, the next one also is a parallel that's not found in our two primary sources, but here we're going to go to back to Sefer Breshit for the Breshit connection, the creation connection. Vayikach Elokim et Adam vayanichehu began Eden le'ovda u'lishomra. God took man and he placed him in the Garden of Eden le'ovda u'lishomra. It's translated here very literally as to till it and to tend to it. I think a better translation would be to work it and to protect it or to keep it. If we go to Sefer Bamidbar, here Moshe is being instructed to sanctify or designate the Shevet of Levi, the tribe of Levi, to work in the Mishkan. Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe lemor, hakrevet matei Levi v'amadata oto lifnei Aharon hakohen v'shartu oto. Take the tribe of Levi and place them before Aharon so that they may serve him. Vishamru et mishmarto et mishmeret kol ha'ida lifnei ol moed la'avod et avodat hamishkan.
Can you move it down a little?
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you.
They shall perform duties for him and for the whole community before the tent of meeting, doing the work of the tabernacle. Vishamru et kol klei ohel moed ve'et mishmeret b'nei Yisrael la'avod et avodat hamishkan. They shall perform. They shall take charge of all the furnishings of the tent of meeting, a duty on behalf of the Israelites doing the work of the tabernacle. I think the English confuses things more here than it helps, because what are the two verbs that the tribe of Levi is commanded to do are, of course, the two verbs that we have from Breshit, vishamru and la'avod, and it repeats itself twice. So man's duty in the Garden of Eden is le'ovda u'lishomra, to work it and to protect it. And in the Mishkan, the Leviim are tasked with vishamru, to protect or to keep, and la'avod, to serve or to work. Okay. The next one, Sefer Breshit Vayishma'u. This is at the very end, after Adam and Chava have eaten from the forbidden tree. Vayishma'u et kol Hashem Elokim mitalech began leruach hayom. They hear God's voice walking in the garden with the wind of the day. Vayichabeh Adam ve'ishto, and they hid mipnei Hashem Elokim betoch eitz hagan. They hid from God in the trees of the garden. With the Mishkan, if we go to Sefer Vayikra, at the very end of Sefer Vayikra, Hashem in the Tochacha and the rebuke tells Moshe, "V'natati mishkani b'tochachem, v'lo tigal nafshi etchem." If you do what you're supposed to do, then I will place my Mishkan among you, and I will not abhor you. V'hithalachti b'tochachem, v'aiti lachem la'lokim, v'atem tiyu li la'am. And I will walk among you. I will be for you a God, and you will be for me a nation. So that's verb of v'hithalech, which is a not so common use of that verb. It's in the reflexive form. Hitpael appears in description of both. And then the next similarity we have is, of course, after Adam and Chava eat from the fruits and are punished and are expelled from the garden, God places kruvim to protect the garden. Vayigaresh et Adam vayishkon mikedem legan Eden et hakruvim ve'et lahat hacherev hamitapechet lishmor et derech eitz hachaim. It was driven out, and east of the garden were stationed the Chrubim and the fiery ever-turning sword to guard the way to the tree of life. And I just noticed as I was reading this pasuk that it's not only that we have Kruvim, but what's the verb? How does God place the Kruvim?
Hasel.
Vayash Kain,
Uh-huh.
the same root as Mishkan.
Mhm.
And then, of course, we have the Kruvim in the Mishkan. Vasita Shnaim Kruvim Zahav Mikshat Seotam Mishnei Ketot HaKaporet. We have these two golden Kruvim cherubs made out of solid gold on the two ends of the Kaporet, of the covering of the ark. Make one kruv on this side and one kruv on that side. Min hakaporet tasu et hakruvim al shnei kitzotav. You should put it on the two ends. Vayu hakruvim por snei knafayim lamala. Sochachim bechanfehem al hakaporet. Ufneim ish al achiv el hakaporet yu pnei hakruvim. And these kruvim should have their wings spread upward, hovering with their wings over the kaporet, over the ark, facing one another. Shall be the faces of the kruvim. And then the final parallel in this table of at least 9, I'm sure we could find many more if we spent some more time with it, is again in the aftermath of eating from the forbidden fruit. Sorry. We read, Vayas Hashem Elokim la'adam ulishto katnot or vayalbishem. God made garments of skins for Adam and his wife, and he clothed them. And if we go to the Mishkan, Ulivnei Aharon ta'aseh kutanot, Vasita lahem avnei tim umigbaot, ta'aseh lahem lechavod uletifaret, v'yobashto tam et Aharon v'tachiv et banav ito, mashachto to mileta. So when it comes, right, Moshe is commanded to prepare all the different clothing, the priestly garments for Aharon, and there it's Ulivnei Aharon ta'aseh kutanot, just like Hashem made for Adam and Chava kotnot, the same word for the clothing or the covering that was made in both instances. So we have these very, very, very strong textual connections between the story of the Mishkan and the story of creation. And we have, but there's more. Actually, we'll leave it at there. Are there any additional comparisons that anyone's thought of, or any thoughts or questions on what we've seen to this point? So the question is why? Well, meaning, so we opened with a medrash that told us that the reason why these two stories are similar or parallels is to teach us that both the Mishkan and creation serve as some sort of witness or testimony against the Jewish people, on behalf of the Jewish people, for the Jewish people, but that they're both a form of testimony. And already sort of teased out or suggested, certainly another way that that this connection is understood is that it's driving home the point that humans have a role in the creation process. That just like God created the world, so humans are able to create and build this Mishkan, which is a place where they can then encounter Hashem. So and perhaps through that to really join together in partnership with Hashem in creation, in creating and sustaining the world. Any other thoughts on what the significance of this parallel might be?
Well, one of the functions of the Cheruvim would be to create a place from which God can speak to us, and the presence can be felt there in particular.
Yeah, so the Kruvim are certainly part of the means of communication or feeling, right? We're told that God's presence is is concentrated between these kruvim. Um, but in general, the Mishkan is a place where we can feel God's presence. So we know that in broad strokes, the world is a place where we feel God's presence as well, right? And some people are much more attuned to feeling it, to feeling God's presence when they're out in nature, experiencing the world in its more natural form. There's certainly a case to be made that we experience and see God not in nature necessarily, but through technology and developing and building, building the world. That imperative of Ovda Lishomra to work it, to continue to develop it. Interestingly, if we go back here to this quick source from Avot Rabbi Natan, Rabbi Tarfon Omer, Af HaKadosh Baruch Hu lo hishra shchinato al Yisrael ad she'asu melacha. God did not rest his presence on the Jewish people until they did some sort of work, until they did work. Shene'emar ve'asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. Only when we construct and the other big parallel, of course, is between the Mishkan and creation and Shabbos, right? We know that all of the 39 malachot of Shabbos is derived from the activities of the Mishkan, how they built the Mishkan. But that God's presence is not manifest in the world until Bnei Israel do milacha, do the specific work required to build the Mishkan. And only then do we have a shachanti b'tocham, that God dwells amongst us. So with that in mind, Rav Amnon Bazak says that, right, and this is what I think Anne was getting at, and we'll just read what he has to say. The same idea underlies the construction of the Mishkan. Just as God created the world and caused man to dwell in it, so man is called upon to build a place for God. Let me make a sanctuary that I may dwell in their midst. Through this act, man becomes God's partner in the creation of the world. Okay, so we have this idea of continuing with the creation, in helping to complete it or to realize the vision, the purpose. And then in the next passage, he offers another idea related, which is in the second paragraph here. We see that the building of the Mishkan was a tikkun for Adam's sin in the Garden of Eden. The exodus from Egypt created, as it were, Am Yisrael. The building of the Mishkan facilitated a return to a state in which God goes amongst Bnei Israel. Adam was unable to bear the spiritual tension and he sinned. Can Bnei Israel now meet God's demands? Will they be able to avoid a return to sin? So we have, right, in very broad strokes, that the parallel is to teach us that we're supposed to continue to partner with God in creation and, dare we say, perfection of the world. And perhaps a bit more specific is that through this Mishkan and, as it were, the recreation of Gan Eden, of the original creation, we can thereby be mitakein. We can try to correct the mistakes that were made the first time around. Mishkan offers us that opportunity.
I brought up the Keruvim because I was heading towards the parallel of doing what we are doing right now, studying the Holy Torah, the presence of Hashem and the wisdom of Hashem is assured to us if we study it together with love. And,
and that's like becomes a very deep idea in on all of rabbinic, of all of what the rabbis are trying to do, which is the major message is that we can survive and continue to experience God even in the absence of the Mishkan or the Beit HaMikdash, and that is done primarily through Torah study, through the Chochmah, Bina, and Da'at, right? The Chabad that Judy referenced earlier, that through peering into God's wisdom, we can continue to experience that.
and have the basis for making something.
Yeah,
basis for making.
In the recent Atlantic magazine, and Judy knows about this, the first article is called "The Despots of Silicon Valley," and it talks about creation, and competition, and for imagination and all that, which has happened over the last 100 years, versus security and humanity. And it goes into detail. It's not very long. It's written by the executive director of the Atlantic magazine. And it's very interesting to read.
Interesting.
It's only several pages long.
Okay. All right. The final connection is Anne referenced that Nechama Leibowitz has some beautiful writings on this. So she quotes a Rashi. We already saw this verse at the very conclusion of the building of the Mishkan. Moshe blesses the people. And what is the blessing that Moshe gives them? Vayivarich otam Moshe. Moshe blesses them. Rashi comments, Amar lahem yehi ratzon shetishresh china b'maaseh yedechem v'hi noam Hashem Elokeinu aleinu v'hu echad miyud aleph mizmarim shebetfila leMoshe. Moshe said, may it be your will that God's presence manifest itself on your handiwork, on that which you have made. V'hi noam Hashem Elokeinu aleinu. Then he quotes the pasuk from Tehillim: "Let the beauty of the Lord our God be upon us, and establish thou the work of our hands upon us." This is one of the 11 chapters of Tehillim that is included in Moshe's prayer. There's an assumption that Moshe wrote some of Tehillim upon the completion of the Mishkan. So Nechama Leibowitz writes on this. Rashi here provided us with the key to understanding of the significance of the tabernacle as it merges from the 7 parallels between creation and the tabernacle. We pointed out even more than 7 parallels.
Yeah.
The Lord created heaven and earth and all therein for man to dwell in, and created them in 6 days and rested on the 7th day. Similarly, Moshe was summoned on the 7th day to the cloud to see the pattern of the tabernacle that it was his duty to erect in order to provide a place on earth for the divine presence. It is incumbent on man to imitate the Creator, his ways and attributes, and assume the role of being his partner in creation. Right. So it's not just that we're right. It's more than we're partners with God in completing or realizing the purpose of creation, but in doing so, we are acting godly. Right. This is one of the sources for halachta bidrachav, or right, the fancy imitatio Dei, to imitate God. Not only do we imitate God by acting kindly and compassionately and providing for the poor and the needy, but we imitate God by doing the actions which God did in creation. We do those in order to continue to manifest and bring God's presence into the world. So that's the creation of the Mishkan, right? We have this very, very strong textual connection between the two. Whenever we have all these thematic, linguistic, verbal connections, we know that something deep is going on. I'm sure that there are many more deep messages and significance of this that others have pointed out, and if we spend some more time with, we could point out as well. If anyone comes up with anything, I would love to hear it. But I think we'll call it a night for now, and look forward to seeing everyone over Shabbos, where we will have, hopefully you'll be joining us not just for davening, but for the Kiddush luncheon that follows, and it'll be a bittersweet as we're bidding a bon voyage to Judy, and she's not leaving us quite yet, and hopefully we'll continue to at least have your digital presence over Zoom, Judy, when you're in Boston. But but I hope everyone will join us in shul for Shabbos as we say goodbye, and have what should be a great a good Shabbos lunch as well. So with that, Lila Tov.
Hey, Laura.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay. Good night.
Mhm.
Good night.
Um,